Hey, what's going on, American Contingency? Want to have a frank discussion with you on talking about things that you could do during an active shooting. Look, there is no capitalizing on this event like the political system is doing right now. So I want to focus on tangible things that you could do in the event this happens. First of all, let me tell you that active shootings, for example, even though over-politicized and used as a tool for political whatever, is very rare. In the collective of all firearms deaths and murders and homicides, pistols make the overwhelming majority. And look, shotguns is more significant than ARs. So this idea that, we're framing it this way, look, in the last 30 days, dozens and dozens of people were killed in Chicago. And people are like, well, Mike, this isn't Chicago. Well, what I'm talking about is death, and any people getting killed is a problem. But all of a sudden, we don't want to talk about neighborhoods in urban Chicago, even though we should be talking about that. I mean, more people have died in Chicago in the neighborhoods, significantly the top 3 neighborhoods, than that in the global war on terror at the same time period. I mean, why isn't it an issue? Well, it's not very political, and it doesn't do a lot of political things on politicians' agendas. That's the problem. I mean, in 2 weeks ago, there were, I think, 16 people or something like that killed in Chicago. That's significant. Not to detract from the victims that were just killed in Colorado and Boulder at a grocery store. King Soopers, grocery store people minding their own business, and they get gunned down by some psychopath who's hell-bent on causing chaos and destruction. I don't care what his background, what his agendas were. It likely ties itself back to mental health. And the fact is, we need to figure out how to navigate these type of issues, because many people are dealing with mental health issues, and we need to be able to protect ourselves and our families. So first of all, you should understand that the government does have a protocol for active shooter. It's called run, hide, fight. I know because I've actually taught that acronym, and I've done so for a long period of time until I realized how much of an issue it was in creating the wrong mindset and the wrong physical composition for people to be able to fend for themselves. Let me explain. So first, you should understand that the acronym system that has to do with an emergency procedure like run, hide, fight is meant to reduce the time it thinks, I think in my head, versus the time that I react. It has to do with immediate action under stress. If you look at the history of these acronyms and how we outline emergency procedures, it actually stems a lot from the aviation industry in the military during World War II. Because if you had symptoms of things that were happening that were going wrong, and you thought through processes, then likely it was too late, because the catastrophe would have compounded itself, and then you didn't have enough time to actually do the diagnostic reaction that's going to save your ass. So when you look at emergency procedures and the breakdown of acronyms, in our lives, it's meant to be simple, stupid, right? Keep it simple, stupid. KISS. So when you say run to somebody that doesn't have an understanding of how to think through problems, they're simply going to run. A lot of this is meant actually for kids, for people who don't have developed prefrontal cortexes, who have the ability to make good decisions. So when you say run, what are we talking about when we tell people to run? When I used to train active shooter and I would go through the acronym and the system, and when you say run, they would come to a critical juncture where they would decide, oh, this is an active shooting, now I'm going to run. Where are you running? Are you running through the front door where the active shooter is? Are you running out the back door? But you don't even know where the back door is. Remember, when we're sympathetic, when we're in a fight, flee, or freeze kind of nervous system, what happens is we're doing that because we're reacting primally, ancestrally. Like fight, flee, and freeze are part of the sympathetic nervous system because we want to survive. But that isn't very adaptive to the situations that we live in now, where technology, for example, could save your ass. Like dialing 911 and telling the person on the other side of the line your 5 W's and understanding the situation could be advantageous. Well, it's hard to do that in a sympathetic nervous state. So if we don't understand how we're actually going to react under stress and then ways to mitigate stress, to think through problems, then we're setting ourselves up to just die. And that's the reality of what I've seen with civilians and even law enforcement who are responding as first responders on the scene. So let's take run. We're going to take each segment and I'm going to replace it with something else. So let's take out run. Instead, let's take the word observe and put that in its place. The reason I want you to use a word like observe is because I want you to stay cognitive. I don't want you to go into immediate action drill where you start running for your life. What I want you to do is, well, first let me let you know that there is a time and place. Immediate action, which is you reacting off of somebody's action when you're trying to save your life, is a thing. If an active shooter is in the aisle with a gun in the same aisle that you're at in a grocery store, well, you don't have time to think. You have to react. That means move off the X. The X, by the way, is where the bad guy is or the bad circumstances. So if I take the word observe, and let's say you hear something that sounds like fireworks or firecrackers, which, by the way, for most active shootings that involve firearms, a lot of witnesses report that. They say, I thought it was fireworks or firecrackers or construction, and then they realized it wasn't. Well, in the observe phase, I'm taking in information and I'm staying cognitive. One thing you could do to mitigate stress, meaning to not be on the back end of the sympathetic nervous state where I'm making bad decisions, I need to breathe. I need to calm down, but I need to have a tactic to think. So if I say to myself, observe, that means I'm taking in the information, I'm collecting that information, and I'm making a decision based on that information. So what I want you to understand is in situational awareness, denial is something we all go through. We all experience denial because we want justification for the means. We hear something that sounds like gunfire and we're like, no, that can't be gunfire. That's got to be firecrackers. Well, it's a Monday afternoon in the middle of Colorado in a grocery store. That doesn't even make sense. So stop trying to make sense of things and have a soluble solution to observe the information and then make a plan of action. This is what this means. So if I'm in a grocery store and I'm observing and I'm taking in that information, then I'm going to have a plan of attack. Let's go back to the government acronym. Run, hide. Look, this aggravates me. This is very aggravating because we don't understand the simplicity of how people hide as we grew up as children. So if I were to say to you right now, in your place of work, go hide. Where would you hide? Well, you would hide in hidey holes. You would hide in cupboards and cabinets. You would hide behind things and under things. So when I say to you hide, what does that mean? It means I'm physically setting you up to not be prepared to fight. Because if you've played hide and seek, are you in a position to be aware of who's potentially coming in there? So if, for example, you're under a table and you're hiding and you're very small, you're in the fetal position, are you prepared to fight? Probably not. Probably not. So if somebody discovers you, what are you? You're a victim. Look, if I use active shootings, I want to use those examples as a lesson learned. So Columbine, for example, the children who were not activating scripts, they were just doing what they thought was best and hiding. They were hiding underneath tables, very small. And the active shooter went table to table, and we know what happened. Very tragic. So we don't need to set ourselves up for failure in hiding, especially after running. So if we are hiding, we're setting ourselves up advantageously to be able to react and respond. That's why I want you to take out hide, and I want you to replace it with fight, right? Not just fight by itself, but fight and flee, and I want you to use those inversely. Here's what I mean. When you hear something that doesn't sound right and you're contemplating, you don't need to be doing that while you're standing still. You don't have to stand on the X and go, I wonder what that is. You don't have to stand in your aisle and start moving your cart and go, that sounds like fireworks or firecrackers. You could, what we call in the troop leading procedures in the military, you could initiate movement. Initiate movement, which is part of the flee. I use fight and flee, or flee and fight inversely. So I want you to think about both. Because if I'm taking in information and I'm starting to physically displace my physical ass off the X, I am getting the advantage of time, distance, and obstacles that I'm putting between me and the firecrackers. And guess what? If I'm wrong, so be it. I always tell people the greatest example of this is in your own home. When you hear a noise and you go, oh, what is that noise? Oh, that's the cat. That's the dog. You don't even have animals, and you're justifying the means because you don't want to get off your lazy ass. So instead, have a protocol for physically displacing your ass, even if it's a false alarm. Because what's the worst that could happen? You lose a little bit of time? Firecrackers, that's weird. I'm going to physically move and begin to move towards the exit away from the firecrackers. Worst case scenario, I get to the back of the store and somebody's like, oh yeah, out front they're doing a celebration. Oh, okay, makes sense. I've never heard firecrackers, but now I'm paying attention. So when you physically observe, you're physically moving off the X in a flee, but you're prepared to fight. Meaning your posture is preparing yourself to fight. You see, in the government acronym, run, hide, fight, as a last resort, they want you to fight. But guess what? Just like every active shooting that where you have casualties, there are people who are not prepared to fight. So we need to set our posture early out the gate. Does that mean draw your pistol in the middle of an aisle in a grocery store and start running around with a gun? Absolutely not. But that means I could, if I'm a female and I have a purse, I could stick my hand in my purse and touch the back strap of that pistol as I'm walking to the exit, or as I'm maneuvering my family to the back of the store, because I'm prepared to fight. That means if I'm carrying concealed, I could create real estate and start thinking about in the mental model how I'm going to acquire my pistol. Those models in which we create are ways that we navigate a visual representation that is a free rehearsal for you to react and respond when the worst case scenario happens. Remember, observe, take in the information, be prepared to move off the X away from the threat. As I'm taking in the information, prepared to fight. What I used to see in active shooting training that I would conduct typically was simunitions, meaning simulated bullets. What you would see is even the guys who were armed would position themselves in hidey holes where they weren't prepared to fight because they didn't know where the bad guy was coming from. Yes, bad guys who potentially open doors if you're hiding in a closet are going to have one way of gaining entry to that. But if you're hiding underneath something, if you're thinking about hiding as opposed to thinking about fighting on the way to fleeing and displacing yourself, you have the wrong mindset. We have to change the ways that we think through these problems. We have to be proactive. This doesn't just happen in a conversation that takes place with, you talking to your family or me talking to you in one-way communication. This starts with training, with physically exercising this right now, today, when you go to the store and you're in the grocery store and you go, okay, what if something happened right now that was bad? The front of the grocery store. Where would I go? Have you ever checked the exit in the back of a grocery store? Have you ever checked the exit in the back of any building that you were in? A restaurant, a department store, a grocery store? If not, start thinking about these things. You know why? Because they're free. It's not hard. It's very easy. And you're setting yourself up for success and not failure. If you are depending on the government to give you the tools and advice to save your life, take it from somebody who's worked for the government for 20 plus years. There is no sound advice the government offers. The government is very disruptive in our lives when they try to include themselves in our lives, and they are chaotic, they are inefficient, and they're full of flaws. You know the best thing you could do for yourself is start thinking for yourself, start acting for yourself, and start depending on yourself for your own self-reliance and security. That's the greatest start point. That's the reason I'm passionate about what I do, because I'm sick of people getting killed when they could have helped themselves. Yes, there are innocent people who are killed because of circumstance, but many people who depend on first responders are depending on a system that is too late. You are your own first response. Thanks, guys.